What if the secret to living longer isn't some futuristic pill, but the choice we make every day, like what we eat? Let's unpack the connection between nutrition and longevity. Welcome to WellYES, where science meets the latest wellness trends. I'm Walter, founder at Hum.
And I am Sarah Greenfield, functional medicine dietitian.
Well, Sarah, we have lots to go through today, and I think this week's episode is on everyone's mind. It's about longevity. So, Sarah, how are you, first and foremost, since we're talking about longevity? I hope you're in good
I'm
spirits.
good. I'm just thinking about all the things I can do to improve my longevity and how many more activities I really want to kind of put on my daily habit list.
And how are things on the East Coast?
They're good. They're good. The weather's kind of chilled out a little bit. We're getting ready to move, so there's a lot of excitement. My kid's going to go back to school in a couple weeks, so everything feels like really exciting.
Yeah, well, moving is always very stressful, so I hope it's going to go run smoothly. Have you decided where to move yet?
Yes, well, we're moving into a house that we got finally, and it's taken a while because, there needed to be some updates made to it. And it's going to be mostly done when we move in, but not quite. So we're going to be, having the refrigerator in the living room and just rolling with it.
Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, on the topic of longevity, I think nothing shortens your life more than doing renovations at your house while you're living there. So good luck with that. But let's really focus on the topic and let's talk about longevity through our lens. It's from a scientific perspective, but also like how how we want to define, because I think we speak a lot about longevity with an idea of living longer, but I think the other lens is to also live a better quality life
Yeah.
until you age. And I think so, or when you age. And I think that's really important to highlight here too, because obviously there's many things you can do to extend your lifespan, but some of them may come at the expense of quality of life. And we'll get back to
Yeah.
that in a second. So I just want to make sure that people understand is like how we're looking at longevity here. And
Yeah.
what I really want to talk about first is and foremost is like, you have been in this field of nutrition, and I've seen this conversation around longevity come and go. It ebbs and flows. When we started Hum in 2012, there was another company called Elysium that started, and they were all about longevity, and they seem to just have disappeared basically. And I'm just curious to understand, is like, from your perspective, why do you think longevity is back?
Yeah. It sounds like they didn't have longevity. Sorry, that was a bad joke. Um, I think about it a lot through the lens of also being a dietitian and like what does that mean? Like, yes, we want to live better, but scientifically speaking, we're looking at things like blood sugar stability, reducing inflammation, eating a more balanced diet. So it's something that's always going to kind of ebb and flow because we're always looking at health from different angles. But when we get down to it, longevity is really that underlining topic that we always come back to about how do I live better? This is why everybody is into wellness. Like when you're taking supplements, when you're looking at what to eat, it's all about having a longer, better quality life. So I think it's always going to be kind of in focus, but it kind of, comes more into like around the term longevity. It'll be more trendy, but it's always kind of being talked about. So it's fun to see how it ebbs and flows. And I think maybe it was like 5 to 10 years ago, there was kind of a different name for it, and it was biohacking. That was another one that was really prominent. And that was all about how do you biohack your way, basically use your body and optimize every single cell in your body to live longer so that it kind of goes by different names, but it always does pop up every once in a while.
Well, I think there's other factors, right? I think the US, obviously, given it's the biggest economy on the planet, yet the population doesn't outlive other nations, right? Developed nations. So I think that's the topic right there. And to your point, there's been lots of things of people really self-experimenting a little bit, biohacking, whether it's through fasting, whether it's like through plant-based diets. We have much more data when it comes to those specific diets. And then, of course, the blue zones research about around the Mediterranean diet. So I think a lot of factors, and there's just like general consciousness around that. And then last but not least, I think we live in such a connected world where these trends, suddenly span not just like from coast to coast, but really around the globe. And I do think that made a big difference too. But why don't we start with diet? Because I think this is such a big topic. There's obviously the Mediterranean diet, right? Everybody talks
Yeah.
about it. What is it, Sarah? What is the Mediterranean diet, and why is it so beneficial to longevity?
Yeah, this is one of the best diets. As a dietitian, it's the one I always come back to over and over again because it's very plant centric with a lot of diversity. It's high in omega 3s, which is really important for decreasing inflammation and longevity in general, brain health, heart health. And it has a good amount of lean and clean proteins. So there's tons of antioxidants, there's tons of polyphenols, there's just all of these really important superfoods and super nutrients that you have in that diet. And it just time and time again, when we look at research, it comes up as one of the top performing diets for a better quality of life.
Yeah, and I think rich in fish, right, as well. So a lot of
Mhm.
like protein that comes from fish. Fish is
Yes.
great for heart health, and we'll dive into that in a second as well. Lots of plants, which we know like really
Yeah.
help here because they have a high nutrient profile. They're low in fat, but they're also like, adding those daily greens that most of us don't get enough of.
Yeah,
And then
absolutely.
I would also interject in this. I know it's not really diet, but I think it's more Mediterranean lifestyle as well, where people truly
Yeah.
sit down. So when we say the Mediterranean diet, it's not just a question of eating certain foods, but eating them in a certain way. And I think that's an important differentiator.
Yeah,
People
for sure.
truly take their time around the Mediterranean Sea where, you sit down, you have your lunch, but it takes like an hour, 2, 3 hours are not unheard of. And
Yeah.
people really socialize around the food. And food is really when everybody comes together. There's a community aspect to it, there's a social aspect, but you really slow down and focus on the food as opposed to like just getting quickly those calories in to keep the engine running. And I think that's a important piece as well that we often overlook is
Yeah.
actually taking your time as you eat, having a bit of a mindfulness when it comes to like, congregating around the dinner table or the lunch table. And I think the social aspect is truly important as well. Um,
Yeah.
let's talk about like, why, specifically nutrients from plant-based or lean protein are super helpful. I think the number one killer, if you will, is heart health. I read a stat that one in 5 women, that's the number one reason like why women die. It's like it's heart health really. So 1 in 5. And for men, same story, 1 in 4 actually. So it is definitely a concern. And I think it makes obviously sense that given that heart health is, so important, protecting that heart health can really, really help with longevity. What are the kind of nutrients that come to mind there when it comes to heart health?
Well, I always think about fiber as a really important one because fiber is going to help absorb some of the fat from our diet. So we're not getting as much of that in our bloodstream, impacting the heart. So fiber is really important. Also, antioxidants. So berries and bright colored fruits and vegetables, and eating a lot of different colors. With higher antioxidants in the diet, you're going to be clearing out free radicals that can come from high stress, high oxidative stress, which is internal in the body. We can get oxidative stress also from blood sugar dysregulation, and that the antioxidants help repair and clear things out. It also makes our liver more capable of turning over and detoxifying when we have those antioxidants that can replenish liver cells. So it's really important to get those fruits and vegetables and whole foods in the diet to get those high levels of antioxidants. And then kind of within that is also that same compound, not same compound, but polyphenols, which is another super protective compound, especially within the gut. It really helps diversify the microbiome. And that is going to have an overall impact and benefit on the body in general. So that's going to be protective for the heart as well, because anytime your gut is functioning at a higher level, your whole body is going to be performing better. One of the other key nutrients that comes up a lot in the Mediterranean diet is omega 3s. So you had mentioned fish being a big source of protein, which is true. And then you have things like, I was always fascinated. There's this one plant called purslane, which is high in omega 3s, which is a big part of the Mediterranean diet. And that's really important when it comes to heart health. When we have this beneficial ratio of good fats to maybe, bad fats, or when that is in balance, it's going to take burden off of the heart and make it more effective and keep it healthier for longer.
Yeah, and omega-3s, I mean, it makes really sense. They've been studied for a long time for heart health and brain health. Heart health, as we said earlier, number one killer in humans, basically, if you will. And then
Yeah.
so
Yes.
protecting and that heart health is so critical. And I think there are two other studies that recently came out, which are super interesting. One really fascinated me, and it fascinated me for two reasons. Number one, I'm actually low in it, and I was shocked. And number two, it's a very solid study that Harvard did over 4 years. And the study was about vitamin D. So, vitamin D is really interesting because it's a hormone, I believe, right? Your body produces when you're exposed to
Yeah.
sunshine.
It's considered to be a hormone, but it's still technically categorized as a vitamin, but it functions like a hormone. So yeah, that's true.
And that study was placebo controlled. I think 2,000 participants over 4 years. And what the Harvard researchers did is like they measured the length of telomeres.
Yeah.
Telomeres, it's been a big topic years ago, but just to recap here, they're the like little protective caps, if you will, at the end of your chromosomes, and they shorten as you age, right? We have always suspected there's a correlation between telomere length and like healthy aging or longevity. So what they do is like they really keep your DNA healthy, stable, if you will, and prevent damage. So that is a great way of like literally like living longer, but also living a high quality life longer, if you will. And that study was really interesting because the group that did take 2,000 IU of vitamin D on a daily basis had significantly longer telomeres than the group that didn't the placebo group. So I was really fascinated by that.
That's very
Obviously, I
cool.
was also shocked to see recently I got my blood work done and like my D3 levels were actually low. And I live in California, and I was like, you never think about D3 supplementation when you live in Southern
Yeah.
California, but it's a really important vitamin that one should perhaps consider when it comes to longevity. And what I love about it, 2,000 IU is a really normal dosage. You don't have to take ultra high dosages. Just make sure you take them on a daily basis to maintain those D3 levels. Because when you do take D3 with supplementation, it does actually raise your D3 levels. So it's a great way of like hacking longevity, if you will,
Yes.
in a
Yes.
way that doesn't break the bank. But what's your perspective on vitamin D? Do you have a lot of like patients as well that you see that often
Yeah.
require D3 supplementation?
I was gonna say what I see in my practice is that low vitamin D is the norm. And there's nuances between conventionally low versus functionally low. Because as I mentioned, I practice more functional medicine. And that looks at levels being normal around 50, whereas conventionally it's around 30. So there's a big gap there when it comes to what is actually an adequate vitamin D level. But I've seen different research studies that have shown, and the reason why functionally we say 50 is because when you look at immune function as well, you have more protection from viruses, from things that can just tax your immune system when you have these vitamin D levels at a higher amount. And yeah, what you were saying with California and like being in the sunshine, people go out, but the problem is when you are wearing sunscreen blocks that conversion. So even if you're
Mhm.
out in the sun and you're all lathered up with sunscreen, you're actually not going to get that conversion as effectively. So I think doing 15 minutes of sunscreen free exposure, like sometimes I'll go out, I'll just put it on my face, but I'll leave my arms uncovered so that I'm getting that good conversion. That's really helpful. And yeah, the last thing too with vitamin D supplements, they're super tiny, which I think is also another benefit. Because when you think about taking supplements, and some people are like, oh, I can't swallow them, it's so hard. It's like vitamin D is just great because it's a teeny tiny capsule that's really easy to integrate into a routine.
And the good news is the plant-based option, like the one that we have here,
Hmm.
made from lichen, which is a mushroom fungus that lives and grows on trees. So that's a great, plant-based option. And as to your point, it's really easy to take. And there's another nutrient that really caught my attention, which was magnesium.
Yes.
And that one surprised me a little bit. I always thought about magnesium around like sleep. So I could maybe draw a connection there. It's like better sleep because I relax more. What's your perspective on magnesium? And did you look at the research that suggested that actually magnesium is one of those three important nutrients one should take in order to improve longevity?
Yeah, magnesium is one of those ones that is so prevalent and so necessary in the body. I believe it's involved in over 300 different metabolic processes within the body. So when you look at what is necessary for longevity and better health, you have to have those building blocks in place. And magnesium is really important for muscle contraction, nerve function, bone health overall. So when you think about an aging body, one of the biggest concerns is osteoporosis, osteopenia, where you start to see that bone breakdown, and then, there's falls and things like that. So we really want to maintain the health and integrity of the bone matrix and the bone structure, and magnesium is really important in that conversation among many other processes in the body.
Great. And there's actually a whole other category I want to move on to right now. Like if you look at like trends of the population, actually, I think it was a couple of years ago where actually people stopped living longer and that trend reversed. And one of those key reasons people believe is obviously we know it's heart health related, but it really has to do with obesity,
Mhm.
which brings us to the next topic. GLP-1s, which are all the rage, we know that. And there is actually a lot of research around heart health when it comes to GLP-1s. Of course, like GLP-1s really come from the world of diabetes, right? And then people noticed that as a side effect, people would lose some weight. And then we had drugs introduced that were focusing on weight specifically. But tell us a bit more about like GLP-1s, like, why they're so beneficial when it comes to longevity.
Yeah. So these are really important when we go back to what I mentioned earlier as a dietitian defining longevity, looking at blood sugar regulation and control. And GLP-1s are creating more insulin sensitivity. So our cells are better able to take sugar out of our bloodstream and utilize it as energy in our cells. So that's really important for longevity. And it's also a benefit of just taking a GLP-1 overall. And also, when you are decreasing weight and burden on your body, you're improving your overall metabolic health. Like with weight loss comes better outcomes with your heart. It decreases inflammation as well, which is very, very protective for the body. So GLP-1 is really important in all of those parts of just health and wellness and longevity, because it's doing all of those things. It's helping you take the weight off, it's decreasing inflammation, it's stabilizing blood sugar. So it's just kind of, when you're looking at the benefits, it's really important in the conversation of longevity because it's improving your overall metabolic status.
And you know what's fascinating? There are now studies as well that are coming out, like apparently GLP-1s can help with dementia, for example. It's
Yeah.
early results, but again, it's all connected, right? So your overall health, obviously heart health, but also if you're like, pre-diabetic, for example, that's a concern. But like, all these things really interact with each other. And then as a result, are precursors to a longer, healthier life or not, if you will. And it's fascinating how much benefit you really get with like really focusing on overall health through different, whether it's nutrients or drugs right now that have been introduced. So I do think we're at this really early stage of GLP-1 research. And given the pipeline there is with many more drugs to come, I do believe there is going to be, much more benefits that we'll see because simply so many people are taking these drugs. And I think we'll learn a lot. And I always say this to people who don't really pay attention to the nutrition world as much as we do.
Yeah.
To us, GLP-1 is really the AI of du jour, if you will, right? So AI, of course, and technology is huge, but like GLP-1s is really like, this is like a whole new barrier that we're a
Yeah.
frontier that we're conquering right now. And there's going to be much more research coming, but also a lot of like, I think, insights from people who are taking these drugs, what that meant for their overall health and well-being as they sort of like went through the treatment. So I'm very excited
Yeah.
about the potential. And I
I'm
think
excited
and
too.
I think it's just the beginning. And I don't want to go off track here, but like the other thing I'm really excited about is actually us collectively losing a few pounds also helps the planet because we consume less resources, and
Yeah, that's a good point.
we eat less, right? We produce less. We have less pounds that need to be transported on airplanes, for example. It really makes a big impact. And
Yeah.
my prediction is that longevity or like the average age of the US population will actually increase again because of these breakthroughs with GLP-1 drugs. So we'll see. what's going
I
to
like
happen.
it.
But that is my prediction right here.
You
Um,
heard it first.
well, probably not first here, but I do think it's something like to really like, of course, we're so close to it and we're like so excited by it. But I do think, for people who are not, as deeply,
Yeah.
invested as we are in this industry, I think it really, it is our AI moment, and I'm really fascinated by it. But let's go back to the other, area that you mentioned earlier, which is gut health, and aging. Tell me a bit more about like, the connection between gut health and longevity.
Well, for me, everything comes back to gut health. I mean, even just talking about GLP-1, GLP-1's made in our small intestine. So to have better intestinal integrity and health overall, right there, it's going to improve your ability to produce GLP-1. So that's, as we have just mentioned, going to help with longevity. And the microbiome is such a big part of our immune system, of our ecosystem. There's more bacterial DNA than human DNA. So it's a really important factor when we're looking at how do we age from a healthier perspective. It also impacts our hormone regulation, which is a really big part of aging. When our hormones shift, there are changes that happen in our body, especially when you start to look at women that are perimenopause, menopause. There's changes in the microbiome, there's changes in estrogen levels. And when we can kind of just make that less severe, there's a lot of profound impacts on the body from that. So the gut to me is always one of the most important places to start when it comes to everything, but especially like hormones. Inflammation starts in the gut many times. So that has links out to dementia, Alzheimer's. So anytime we can optimize and make that gut a healthier ecosystem, that's just such a gift for our bodies.
I think there's obviously stages in life, right? So I think
Yeah.
like there's going to be probably a focus on like nutrition, um, before menopause or before perimenopause, and then, post-menopause. Tell us a little bit more, like, like what the big differences are from your perspective around like changing dietary habits when it comes to women specifically that are experiencing perimenopause.
Yeah, I mean, well, what's interesting, and it'll be interesting to see the impact with GLP-1s, but typically with men, like when you're getting around that age of menopause, going through menopause, there's a lower caloric need overall. And when you look at longevity and the research around longevity, there's been a lot of studies looking at a lower calorie diet and the benefits that has on just aging and being healthy while you age. I think when we're making that transition hormonally, there's also kind of a lessened need, depending on your activity level, of course, but we're not as metabolically active and we're not utilizing or don't need as much caloric intake. So I think with that and shifting our diets and our perspective of how we eat, that's really important. And also with the gut microbiome, what's fascinating is if you look at diversity of the microbiome, that actually significantly changes post menopause. It becomes a lot less diverse. So that's another fascinating thing to see just as our bodies change. And I think another topic that's just important is also in the aging space. Yes, we want to live long, and yes, we want to be healthy and we want to feel great. And also we are aging and our bodies are changing. And there's also an important conversation for the acceptance of where we are and what does change. Because
Yeah.
especially like, just being in big cities, there's so much focus around not aging. And I just want to
Wow.
honor and hold space for what it feels like to age and how empowering that can be as a woman, especially like, for me, coming into a new decade of my life, I think a lot about the changes in my body and the changes in my appearance and how do I embrace that versus always trying to supplement my way out of it or think about injectables or whatever it is that is on that table for longevity. I just want to like have that PSA for loving ourselves and embracing the changes that do come while also maintaining and optimizing our health and wellness.
Well, I'm so glad you're bringing this up, and I do think there is a sort of like obsession with youth, which is a bit unhealthy too, right? I mean, we should really respect our bodies as we go through different phases and as we are aging, and not try to visually appear a certain age and then therefore ignoring the needs that we truly have as we age. And I think generally speaking, we should be celebrating it, right?
Yeah,
And
heck yeah.
I really think so. And I was on Friday in Beverly Hills, and I can tell you, it's like, I mean, it was like, wow, this is like just everybody was so obsessed with appearing
Yeah.
young, but it wasn't pretty.
It can
It
get a little scary.
it
There's that
wasn't.
blindness that happens too,
I think
where
so. It's this obsession. I think I'm so glad you mentioned this because just like I think love yourself through the ages. I think it's really important. And I think it's that inner love that then transpires as well on the outside versus the
Mhm.
outside appearing a certain way. And then,
Yeah.
it just doesn't work like that. And I think that approach to yourself and being comfortable in your own skin through work, it takes work to accept yourself, right? And it takes work to remind yourself as well. And I think that's our job here too, is like love yourself throughout the process, as opposed to like, mimicking an ideal that was
Yes.
made up, just to make you feel bad and therefore consume or, follow certain trends that are not necessarily. And I think I'm glad you brought this up. But, obviously as we age, I think there's like one other thing. We spoke about nutrition, of course, but I would also mention things like exercise is really important.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't have
That's a
to
good one.
be, it doesn't have to be um Iron Man or Iron Woman kind of exercise. What I'm talking about is like regular exercise. And there's even debate, is it 10,000 steps a day or 5,000? I mean, there's
Yeah.
constantly shifting research, but I always think about my mom here who does her 10,000 steps minimum. And she's like turning 80, how old is she turning this? 85. So,
Wow.
and she does her
Oh,
20,000 steps, no problem every day. And
that's
like she,
amazing.
and is in great shape and also like really in great health. And I think her secret was just a constant exercise, relatively low calorie diets in general. So just like didn't overeat basically, but that's that constant exercise, I think. And she's
Yeah.
just like really connected with that. And I think it's helpful to see that. And it's nice to see that as well as a role model, if you will,
Yeah.
where, you just sort of like embrace yourself and like focus on these things. And she's very happy. So I think
That's
exercise is really
beautiful.
is an important role. And with exercise, of course, watch that protein intake and maybe
Yeah.
trade on sugar, if you will, take that out of your diet, but add, of course, like protein to make sure you maintain that muscle mass because that's really hard to maintain as you age.
Yeah.
But again,
Yeah.
don't drive yourself mad either. And I think the other piece, of course, is like sleep,
Yeah.
which is a
Sleep.
big
Hmm.
ingredient when it comes to maintaining health and wellness, because really what you do overnight is you recover from the day. You give your
Yes.
body
Yes.
that
Yes.
break, your skin cells renew, but also your other cells renew. So it's like, I think it's really important to call that out as well and doing things that help with those things, exercise and sleep. Really making sure, and maybe it's like learning relaxation techniques, for example. It's another way of like helping you out. Or if you're stressed out about something, work on that too, and then so it doesn't keep you up at night. So I think there's lots of
Yeah.
things we can do, which then feed into that longevity piece, which are really important. And I think it's a great segue into the next topic, which is our well, yes, and well, no. What are yours this week, Sarah?
Well, yes, since we talked about the gut and gut diversity, is stool testing and microbiome mapping and really understanding what types of bacteria you have in your gut. And so you can feed them appropriately. You can work on diversity in your diet. You can increase fermented foods. Like the gut microbiome is big on my heart. So that's my well, yes. My well, no is demonizing carbs or demonizing really any sort of food in this like very harsh, like this is bad. And if you eat it, this is bad. We talked about self love. And I think, the more that we can love ourselves and be balanced in our approach and not do anything too extreme, it's really important. And especially with carbohydrates, we've talked about menopause, perimenopause, they're very important for women. So I don't like when there is that demonizing carbohydrate conversation. So that is my well no.
Okay, awesome. Well, my well, yes, is D3. It's so easy.
Whoop,
It's
whoop.
like it's a small soft gel every day, and it's an easy hack for longevity. I love that. And it's just
Yeah.
one of those things where you don't remind yourself how important it is. But I was so happy to read that research piece that came out of Harvard. And so that's my big well, yes. And my well, no is although I must say I do admire the dedication of Brian Johnson's work when it comes to longevity. So it's like I was looking at the protocol, and I think if your day consists of like eating a very regimented diet, very little playtime, if you will, but also I think taking up to 50 capsules or supplements a day. If this adds, and it probably will, like a few years to your life, if I think about that trade-off between like, okay, doing this every day for the rest of my life versus not doing it and then living maybe a little shorter, but at the same time enjoying every day so much more, I I think I go towards the quality of life piece. And I think every moment is so precious. And we always think about the next, but let's live in that moment. Let's be present. And I think that is equally important when it comes to longevity than just celebrating like numbers, if you will. So my well-known, unfortunately, is like following that protocol that involves a lot of sacrifices to daily quality of life, if you will.
Yep. I
That's
100%
that's where
agree.
I am on this one. All right. Let's go to our last segment, which is our RD rapid fire. And this week, surprise, surprise, we're gonna rate foods for nutrition, of course, and longevity. Um, Again, a 10 is obviously the best as good as it can go, and a 0, it's really not helping. So why don't we start with D3?
10,
Turmeric,
10,
um, aloe vera water,
6,
chia seeds,
9,
flax seeds,
9,
maca powder,
8,
broccoli,
10,
kale,
10,
cheese,
7,
olive oil,
9,
and balsamic vinegar, not vinegar, balsamic vinegar.
6.
All right. You've been very generous this week, Sarah.
I'm feeling good.
I love it. Well, listen, that is the end of our episode about nutritional longevity. Thank you so much. And if you like this podcast, as always, please hit the like button, drop us a comment, subscribe, and share with your friends. I also want to thank our producer, Brooke, and our production assistant, Fatima. And as always, thank you so much, Sarah Greenfield, for joining us here on
My pleasure.
WellYES.